Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum and welcome to the Hard-Won Islamic Study Circle HISC Seerah session 219. We're, alhamdulillah, onto the final days of the Seerah of the life of the Prophet ﷺ. And last time we talked about some of the indications around the finality of the Prophet ﷺ's mission, his life. So there were some indications earlier on in the 10th year of Hijriya, etc. For example, the Prophet ﷺ did double the length of itikaf in his last Ramadan. He went through the Qur'an twice with Jibreel, or rather Jibreel went through the Qur'an twice with him. Normally Jibreel just did it the once. So obviously these are the things which get the Prophet ﷺ thinking. Obviously in the farewell pilgrimage, we covered how the Prophet ﷺ, he said farewell to everyone, to the people that were gathered there, said, he doesn't know if he'll get the opportunity to do Hajj with them again. So learn what they can from him on that occasion. We also talked about how Surah An-Nasr was revealed again, some of the scholars say. And then we talked about some of the verses in the Qur'an which allude to the Prophet ﷺ being mortal and dying. For example, you are going to die as they will die, and other verses in the Qur'an. Also, remember we talked how when he was sending Mu'adh ibn Jabal to Yemen, he said to him, look, Mu'adh, you may not see me again next time, I might be dead, and you'll just pass by my grave. We also mentioned how a few days before he fell ill, he went to Uhud, to the battlefield, and he observed the farewell prayer to the martyrs, the shaheed from Uhud, and said that soon he will be joining them. Then on sort of the midnight, sort of the day or two before he became ill, he was commanded by Jibreel to go to al-Baqi cemetery and do dua for all the inhabitants in al-Baqi cemetery. And then on the way back from Baqi, he had a conversation with Abu Muwayba, who he took with him, one of his servants. He took with him to accompany him to the cemetery, and he said to him, look, I've been given a choice either to stay alive until the end of the world or to die and meet Allah. And Abu Muwayba said, obviously, stay with us. And Moses said, look, I've already made my choice. And then it said, according to some reports, on the last day of Safar, in the 11th year of Hijri, the Prophet ﷺ fell ill with a headache and a fever. And obviously it was slight to begin with, but then it became more severe as the days went on. And then as he's becoming more ill, he gathered all his wives and he asked permission to stay in the house of Aisha, which was obviously adjoining the masjid as well. And then she recited the Qur'an and tended to the Prophet ﷺ and his fever during those last days. And then we talked about some of the banter that went on between them, between the Prophet ﷺ and his wife. And then on one occasion he asked for a cold bath to cool him down, and then this was just before going to the masjid to give a khutbah or a sermon or a talk to the people, and he was held up by Abbas and Ali as they're going to the mosque. So that's where we finished it. So we'll pick up from there, inshallah. So the books of Seerah, they vary in sort of the days and what happened on which day. There's not that a clear chronology of events. So I'm just going by on the source that I have, the sealed nectar, and going through their chronology of these the last week, the last 4 or 5 days of the Prophet's life. And it said on the Wednesday, 5 days before the Prophet died, his temperature got even more severe, and he fainted because he was suffering from the pain. And we talked about last time how in those days people didn't have simple over-the-counter painkillers. They, if they're having a headache, they, They couldn't just go nip to the pharmacy and get some paracetamol or ibuprofen or aspirin. The pain would be quite severe, and some of the herbal remedies may not even touch the pain, especially if it's severe. And people would faint due to the pain and the suffering from the pain. And it's recorded that people actually, because of the severity of the pain in those days, people would die, not necessarily from the illness, but from the pain caused by the illness and suffering. We take these things for granted, and we don't recognize the shifa that comes through Allah's permission in these basic painkillers that we use nowadays. And so Prophet, when he fainted, he said, pour on me 7 qirab or water skin pots from the various wells, so that I may go out and meet the people and talk to them. So the Prophet, obviously knowing that he is very, very ill, and he wants to deliver these messages to the people. And it said that they sat him in a container that they usually used for washing, and they poured these 7 water skin pots over the Prophet ﷺ until he said, that's enough, and he felt sort of cooled down enough to be able to go out. And as we say, he was walking there on the shoulders of Abbas and Ali, who are obviously from his household. Ali, obviously, his cousin and son-in-law, and Abbas, his uncle. Then as he goes to the mosque, and he's sat down on the mimbar, and he's not usually when the Prophet would go to the masjid, even before praying, there would be a preamble. He'd meet people, he'd say salams, he'd inquire about how people are doing. But as he's ill now, and again, this is the thing that caused greater anxiety in Medina. He's just going in, praying, and coming back out. And obviously, people know that this is not what they are used to. And obviously, the Prophet must be very ill or in considerable distress for him to be like that. And obviously the rumors have spread of his illness, and because of that, people started sleeping in the masjid. They're getting worried, obviously they want sort of first-hand information, and they want to sort of be close to the Prophet ﷺ. And so you can just imagine in these last few days, most of or a lot of the adults in Medina are camped out inside the masjid, just waiting for good news from the Prophet that he's better. So the Prophet, he, as I say, he's washed down with water, and he goes out and addresses the people. And some scholars say this might have been the Jummah khutbah. Others say, well, it may have been sort of just a random, well, not a random, but a non, just a run-of-the-mill talk or discussion or sermon for the people. So he's got his head bandaged, and again, we talked about how the process, when he was in the severe pain, he would tie a very tight bandage around his neck just to help with the headache. So he's got this headache, this bandage, and he's walking through on Abbas and Ali. He sat down on his mimbar, on his pulpit, and then he addresses the people. So he says, the curse of Allah falls upon the Jews and the Christians for what they have made their prophets' tombs, for they have made their prophets' tombs places of worship. And then he says, do not make my tomb or my grave a worshipped idol. So again, in the process, he's obviously cognizant of the fact that he's entering the last phase of his life, and he wants to make it explicit to the people that he doesn't want them to fall into the same trap that the Jews and the Christians who venerate their saints and their prophets, as much as people used to do of the idols in the time of the Quraysh. So he's saying, look, the curse of Allah fell upon these people because they made their prophets' tombs places of worship. So don't make my grave or tomb a worshipped idol. And again, so he doesn't want there to be a masjid around his grave, where people do sajda and worship, and then over time that would then become an object of idolatry. So he's admonishing the people to make sure that doesn't happen. Obviously, this is something that is quite weighty on his mind. Then it said that again he's cleaning the slate and just preparing himself for his final journey to meet his Lord. So he just wants to go with no attachments, with no nothing weighing him down. So he then says to the people, and he invites them to repay any injuries that he might have inflicted upon them. So basically says, he whom I have ever lashed, punished his back, I offer my back so that he may avenge himself on me. And he whom I have ever blasphemed his honor, here I am offering my honor so that he may avenge himself. So again, we've talked before when we talked about the before you go to Jannah, once you pass the Sirat, there is another stage of reckoning where people who have done bad to you, you can you have a reconciliation such that you don't enter into Jannah with any hard feelings. And so the Prophet says, look, if I've done anyone wrong, if I've punished you or treated you badly, or said something against you, now's your time to get your revenge, because I don't want to be in that position, something that holding me up to enter Jannah. So obviously nobody took him on that. And then it said that he descended the mimbar, did the noon prayer, and then he went back onto the mimbar and he resumed his talk or his khutbah. And then he one of the things he was saying is that if I owe any of you anything, monetarily, then say now, and it will be sorted out. And so the Prophet kept repeating that, do I owe anyone anything? Do I owe anyone anything? Do I owe anyone anything? And he kept insisting, if there's anyone who to whom the Prophet is in any debt, he needs to speak now. And then there was one person in the audience who, because the Prophet kept insisting and repeating and said, Ya Rasulullah, you owe me 3 dinars. And 3 dinars is next to nothing essentially. And the Prophet says, what is that and how is that? So remind me, I've obviously forgotten why I owe you these 3 dinars. And the person said, Ya Rasulullah, I wouldn't have said so. He's quite embarrassed. He said, Ya Rasulullah, I wouldn't have said so, but because you were insisting so many times, I felt that if I didn't say something, I would be sinful or I'll be guilty. And then, so he's basically making an excuse saying, look, because you kept insisting, I thought that, there are these 3 dinars I remember, and if I didn't say something, I would be sinful. That's the reason I'm saying that you owe me these 3. And he says, look, one day there was a beggar passing by and you said, who would give money on my behalf to this beggar? And I gave him, but you didn't pay me back. Wallahi, if you did not keep asking and asking, I would not have mentioned this. And then so the Prophet says, turns to al-Fadl and says, pay him the money. And again, obviously, al-Fadl from his own household. And then the Prophet went on to address the people, and some say this happened on the next sermon, some say it happened on this sermon. He said, I admonish you to be good to the Ansar, the helpers. They are my family, and with them I found shelter. They have acquitted themselves credibly of the responsibility that fell upon them, and now there remains what you have to do. You should fully acknowledge and appreciate the favor they have shown me and overlook their faults. And in another version it says, the number of believers will increase, but the number of Ansar helpers will decrease, to the extent that they would be among men as the salt in the food. So he who from among you occupies a position of responsibility and is powerful enough to do harm or do good to people, he should fully acknowledge and appreciate the favor of these benefactors that they have shown and overlook their faults. Now this is really important, because again, we see nowadays how anxious people get, especially here in the UK and other places in the Western world, when you have refugees coming into a country. The host population gets really upset. There's a lot of xenophobia and anxiety against foreigners and refugees and asylum seekers, and people turn against them. In Medina, it was almost the opposite. You did get some of that resentment from the hypocrites, but the majority of the Ansar, they were selfless in how they helped the Muhajirun. The people, not just coming from Makkah, which is the original 300-400 people, but all of the other people coming from all the other provinces around the Arabian Peninsula, and even outside that, from Syria and Turkey and other places, right? You have all these people entering into Medina. So the demographics are changing. So from the Ansar being the most populous people, because it's their city, Medina, now you with the influx of people from outside, technically Muhajirun, right? Not just those from Makkah. They are slowly becoming the minority in their own town, in their own area. But they have maintained their dignity. And the Prophet said, look, soon they will be outnumbered by people coming in. But don't use that sort of flex to look down upon them, because these guys helped me and they fulfilled their promise, right? They've done their job perfectly. So those people who are in charge afterwards, and it's like some would say there's it's implied here, there's an implicit sort of reference here, that the Muhajirun or the Quraysh, they will be in positions of power. The Ansar will not have leadership. They will not be the Khalifs. And again, there's a sort of a strong opinion amongst the early scholars, is that the Khalif, the Khalif should be from the Quraysh. So the Prophet is basically saying that for those who are in positions of power, you need to treat the Ansar really well and overlook their faults. They're not perfect, they're not angels, but you need to overlook their faults as a group of people and as individuals. So again, just really getting these final messages out, cleaning the slate, making sure the message is clearly understood with the people, right? And so that so again, he's praising the Ansar by saying they have helped me, they've done the job. But also that praise is then sort of not limited, but sort of tempered by the fact they're saying, look, they're not going to be in a position of ruling, but those that are need to look after them, right? Then the Prophet, he went on in this short khutbah sermon, and he said, Allah the Great has given a slave of his the opportunity to make a choice between whatever Allah desires of what he desires of Allah's provisions in this world and what he keeps for him in the world, but he has opted for the latter. So when the Prophet what the Prophet is basically saying is that there's a slave of Allah who's been given the choice to have whatever he wants in this world from Allah, or to go to be with Allah. So when the Prophet says that a lot of the people in the audience, they're saying, "Oh wow, what a lucky man!" Because they're understanding this as a very sort of bland, generic, reference to there is somebody somewhere who's been given a choice, right? That choice is these two choices, and he's made his choice, and we should be happy that this person has made this choice. But when the Prophet said that, there's one person in the audience who started crying, bawling his eyes out, and that was Abu Bakr Siddiq. And so people turned around and said, "Who's that old man crying?" And they could see that it was Abu Bakr. And then Abu Bakr, he then says that may we sacrifice our fathers and our mothers for your sake, right? So the people are thinking, why is he crying? Why is he saying, can we sacrifice our mothers and fathers? And again, we've talked about how this is an idiom, a phrase amongst the Arabs, that we would sacrifice everything for you. He's saying, look, we should I wish I could sacrifice my mother and father for you. And the people saying, look, this person, the Prophet is saying there's a person who's been given a choice and he's made his choice. And Abu Bakr is crying and wanting to sacrifice his mother and father for his sake. And they didn't understand that. The Prophet understood. Abu Bakr understood what the Prophet was referring to. The people didn't. But when the Prophet passed away, the people then, in hindsight, recognized the status of Abu Bakr, because he fully understood what the Prophet meant by that. And the Prophet, although he's speaking in a sort of generic term, there is a person, a servant of Allah, who's been given a choice, and he's made his choice. And Abu Bakr is crying. But Abu Bakr knew that person the Prophet was referring to is himself. The Prophet didn't say, I've been given a choice. He said, there's a person who's been given a choice, and he's made his choice. And Abu Bakr is crying because of that. So when the Prophet saw Abu Bakr crying, he turns to Abu Bakr and says, the fellow I feel most secure in his company is Abu Bakr. If I were to make a sincere friendship, a khalil, with anyone other than Allah, I would have made Abu Bakr my khalil, my bosom friend. For him, I feel affection and brotherhood of Islam, and I cannot take him as my Khalil. I cannot take Abu Bakr as my Khalil because Allah has chosen me as a Khalil. Right. So basically saying, look, my BFF is if I was to have a BFF, it would have been Abu Bakr, but I can't have a BFF because Allah has made me his BFF. And Allah made two people his BFFs, Ibrahim alayhi salam and the Prophet sallam. The Prophet says, look, I can't make Abu Bakr my BFF, right? But if there was anyone that would have been that, it would be Abu Bakr. So again, he's bigging up Abu Bakr amongst the people, elevating his status, the status of Abu Bakr, without saying he's the chap who should take over from me. He's giving as much indirect praise and or direct praise of Abu Bakr as he can, without appointing him as a successor after him. But he's saying, look, and then he goes on to say, no gate shall be kept open in the masjid except that of Abu Bakr's. So at the time, we've talked about this before. The Prophet, he made the mosque, and it's got, brick walls, clay walls, and people would then build their houses onto the mosque. So the mosque wall would be built there, and people would then, be a detached property or terrace property essentially onto the mosque. And people would then have their own personal doors from their house, because the wall of their house is adjoining the mosque. They'd make a door so they could walk straight into the mosque. And these are some of the senior Sahabi, and some of the Muhajirun, senior Muhajirun, they have their house adjoining the masjid and a doorway into the masjid. And so at prayer times, they would just walk in from their house. And obviously the Prophet's house, the house of Aisha, that's one of these houses that's got a doorway into the masjid. And Abu Bakr, he had a dwelling there as well. And Prophet said, all the other Sahabi who've got their doors adjoining the mosque, all of those doors need to be sealed up, except that for Abu Bakr. And again, this is an indication or an indirect reference of the fact that the status of Abu Bakr is, really high and should be respected. So that's happened sort of 5 days before the Prophet passed away. Then 4 days before he passed away, some said this will be on the Thursday. The Prophet, he is essentially he's delirious with pain, and the Sahabi are getting quite anxious, and they're in the room. You've got the Prophet, you've got Umar bin al-Khattab, you've got Ali, you've got Abbas, you've got a few other people there who are witnessing how the Prophet is in severe, shadid pain. And then as he's in this pain, and not many of you have been around people who are sort of towards the end of their life or who are suffering with the pains of death. But when you are, sometimes when you see these people, nowadays the pain management is really good, but people become almost delirious with pain. So that the pain causes them so much anxiety that they sometimes lose the link between themselves and the reality and consciousness, and they can start mumbling things. And the Prophet, he's in this state of delirium with his pain, and it's obvious to the people around him. And so it's not recorded what the Prophet said, obviously, because the people are very respectful of what the Prophet of him. But it's obvious that he's suffering. So the Prophet, as he's sort of in this delirium of pain and he's suffering, he says, "Come here, I will cause you to write something so that you will never fall into error." So he's asking for a pen and a paper. And then as he's asking for this pen and paper, Umar bin al-Khattab, who's obviously one of the most senior ones there, he says, the Prophet of Allah is suffering from acute pain, and we already have the Qur'an. The book of Allah is sufficient for us. So he overruled the Prophet's request for the pen and paper. And then there's a side conversation that happens between Al-Abbas and Ali. And they're saying that basically, should we get the Prophet ﷺ to write down what he wants? And then Ali, I think it's Ali, who says basically, no, I'm fearful that he may not write, or he may not give what we want. So basically, there's a conversation between Abbas and Ali, basically saying, Abbas is saying, look, if he's wanting this, a pen and paper, maybe he wants to write down the fact that he wants someone else to take over. Whereas Ali's saying, look, I'm not convinced that's the case, and we don't know what he wants to write. And if he does write something which goes against us, well, then it's written down, and there's no way we can get around that. So there's that conversation, and there's the conversation of Umar ibn al-Khattab. But essentially, people started arguing, and when the Prophet heard the people arguing, he got very angry and agitated with them and told them all to go away and leave him alone. And again, this is, again, we've talked before about the incident of the well, Ghadir Khum, where Prophet talked, where he's praising Ali as his Mawla, and then there's this occasion where the people afterwards, the Shia Ali, the party of Ali, they interpret some people interpret the motives of Umer in a bad way. And again, this is, you'll hear this when you have discussions with some people from the Shia faith, that they see this as a conspiracy, whereas from our books of Seerah, it's quite, it's easy to explain that this is basically the Prophet. He's in the delirium of pain, and he's mumbling and saying things which may not be coherent. So Umar says, look, we don't need him to write anything down. We have the Qur'an and his example. So that's one of the things. The other thing that happened on that day is that it said that the next day he went out and talked again to all the people who were gathering in the mosque. He can see them all in the mosque. He hears them all in the mosque. So he gathers the strength and he's led in again, and he gives what some say is his final khutbah, final pieces of advice to the people. And in these, the various scholars of hadith of the Seerah, they put different things. There's 4 or 5 different pieces of advice here, which they've said probably happened around now. One of them is, first thing he said, and again, bearing in mind the Prophet knows his time is limited. He's coming towards the end. He knows it. He feels it. So he's trying to clear everything and sort out any misgivings. He's already mentioned all the stuff in the farewell pilgrimage. He said his goodbyes to the people in the grave, and he's trying to just set the record straight. He's tried to say, look, has anyone owes me anything, or have I done anything bad to people? And now he's giving his final pieces of advice. One is, Jews, Christians, and polytheists, idol worshippers, should be expelled out of Arabia. There should be no idolatry on this land. Right, so he's quite explicit that there should be no idolatry, and the Jews and the Christians should be expelled from the Hijaz, Makkah, and Medina. And again, what that means is, from a fiqh perspective, is that churches and synagogues are not allowed, in the Arabian Peninsula, in the Hijaz. It's all right for Jews and Christians to come and visit, because we've seen that, and we saw that in the time of the Prophet. We've seen that in the time of the Khulafa Rashidin, that people can visit, because obviously foreign dignitaries, ambassadors, and people like that need to come. And so it's not saying Jews and Christians aren't allowed. It's saying that the institutions of Judaism and Christianity and their places of worship and idolatry are not allowed on the peninsula. So that's the first thing he said. Then regarding that, again, the clarification is that delegations that have been coming for the last year, we've talked about the year of delegations, should be honored and entertained in a similar way that the Prophet ﷺ used to do. Right? So he's preparing the people, for the time when he's not around, and setting the example. They should carry on with the same example that he set, and be as generous to future delegations who may well become Muslim. They should be treated with the honor that he has afforded all visitors and dignitaries, as we've seen in the year of delegations. Even those that had outright animosity towards Islam and the Prophet, he still treated them with respect. And he's saying you've got to carry on that. And then one hadith says, as for the third, the narrator forgot it. It could have been adherence to the Qur'an and the Sunnah, or it could have been related to the sending out of the army of Ussama. We talked about how the army of Ussama was dispatched, and it's sort of camped 2 days outside of Medina, and then Ussama comes back, and we'll talk about that inshallah next week. Or it could have been the performance of prayers and being attentive to slaves, and this is what the narrator of this hadith says. Other books say that a couple of other things he mentioned is that you should have good thoughts of Allah when you are about to die. The Prophet, he's mentioning this, he's not explicitly saying I'm about to die, but the indication is there that he feels he's about to die, and he's letting people know that as if you are in that privileged position where you get a sense that you're about to die, be positive, have good thoughts about Allah when you are about to die. It's really important. Don't go around blaming Allah and go doing what ifs and accusing Allah of things, because that's where shaitan can play with your mind. And so you need to have good thoughts, you need to have a good ending. The Prophet is saying, in order to have this good ending, have good thoughts about Allah when you are about to die, right? And you know, this is really important for us who are, you know, in that. And again, if we're visiting people who are ill or on the deathbed, it's encouraging them to have these good thoughts about Allah and to be positive about the next phase. And again, in the very last sermon of khutbah, the Prophet ﷺ, he finishes off by saying, As-salah, As-salah, and fear Allah with regards to the weak and the oppressed of society, the slaves and the servants. Fear Allah, for they will have a chance to complain on the day of judgment. So again, he's sitting on his mimbar, and the very last things he's telling people is As-salah, As-salah. And again, it's praying. And it's not just physically praying, you know, reminding people of the salah. It's guarding the salah, protecting the salah. It's valuing the institution of prayer, right? Have fear of Allah. Be mindful of your prayers. Look after the weak and the oppressed. Don't do them wrong, because on the day of judgment they can get their own back, right? So these are these are sort of some of the final sermons Prophet did before he passed away. I did want to do how Abu Bakr as-Siddiq then started leading the prayers, but inshallah we'll do that next time. We'll start that off next time. But essentially, just to sort of prelude that for next time, it said that after Maghrib, the Prophet ﷺ, he comes back to his house. Time for Isha starts. Bilal comes knocking on the door and asks permission from the Prophet ﷺ that it's time for Isha. Shall I do the Iqamah? The Prophet ﷺ stands up to lead the Salah, and then he collapses, and then he stands up again, and he collapses and loses consciousness. Does it? And then Bilal says, it's time for Salah. Stands up again, and he collapses and loses consciousness for a longer time. And then when he comes around, he says, have the people prayed yet? Right? And then they said, no, we're waiting for you. And then it said that this happened on 7 occasions. He's trying to get up to lead the prayer, and he just collapses and faints and loses consciousness. And then he comes around and says, have you prayed yet? And then this is where he then says to get Abu Bakr to lead the people in Salah. But inshallah, we'll talk about that in more detail next time, inshallah. And how the daughter of Abu Bakr, Aisha, she doesn't want Abu Bakr to lead the prayer for various reasons. You can think about these potentially, what they could be, and then we'll talk about what happened next. So inshallah, until next time, do remember us in your du'as, and Bismillah. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاك الله خير. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much.